Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another exciting broadcast with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And as you probably know, in this epic week, we are partnering with the amazing folks at If Then. If Then is an initiative of the Lion Health Philanthropies celebrating and showcasing the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. They have 125 amazing ambassadors that they have featured in all manner of incredible SciComm events, programs, campaigns, and more. You can check out all sorts of details at ifthenshecan.org. And what we wanted to do this special week as part of our whole month only featuring women in STEM is to feature 16 of their incredible ambassadors for this series. So we've done everything from deep sea exploration to archaeology. We've done neuroscience of love yesterday with Crystal Dilworth to wrap up. And today we start day 4 with a bang with our friend Adele Luta. She is a friend of the program. She's joined us many times, including from the sea bottom inside like a giant research base at the bottom of the ocean, which is very, very cool. She is on social media at Serenity Astro. You can check her out at adelluta.com. She's an aquanaut, scuba diver, pilot, astronaut trainer. She's done a little bit of everything. And just before this broadcast got underway, inspired by Sam Wins on day 1 with a snake ambassador, she wanted to bring in a dog ambassador to greet us today to kick off the broadcast. So Adele, welcome to the program and introduce us to your friend.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Anara. So she is a German Shepherd mix, and she's a little shocked. So she's new to our family. So we just I rescued her about a month ago. And one of the things I wanted to start off by talking about is she's been outside. So she was not born in a house. She was born outside, and she had to go and find water. So one of the ways that she would go and find water was by drinking puddles or by just different water access sources. So we first got her, might be surprising, we would put a bowl of water down on the ground and she wouldn't drink it. She was like, I don't know what this is. And so it took us a while to convince her, like, hey, no, this water's for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how water is so important in extreme environments and how for a while we had to do the same things that Anara needed to do. But eventually, even in extreming, we're going to have to go and get that water as well. So thanks for joining us. We will talk.
Thanks, Anara.
All right.
I love the segue, by the way. What a beautiful tying in of.
Yeah. Okay.
So
hopefully that's
back. Anara is a star. We all want her to know. She's amazing.
She is. She's a very yes. So yeah, let's switch over to the slides. And I did want to, again, thank If Then. It's been such a pleasure to be an ambassador with them, such an amazing community of women. And if you have an opportunity to do a crossover and visit some of the resources out there, there's just lots of videos of all different types of scientists, engineers, STEM women that you can check out. And it's just been amazing to be there. So today I want to talk about extreme environments with you guys. And in that particular category, really just mention, what does that mean? How is that so different from the Earth life that we live down here? And I'd like to start off with this picture, because this picture expresses how far away we really, really want to go and kind of the steps for that. A lot of us have seen a picture from the moon looking back at Earth, or you've seen a picture from the cupola from the space station, and the Earth is really big and it's welcoming, it's amazing. But if we really want to move out, we really want to go explore, it means getting farther and farther away from our kind of natural home, which is Earth. And that means that you are looking at the Earth there from Mars. So Mars, while we look up and we see a red dot in the sky, that's what the dot of Earth is going to look like. And in order to do that, we really have to make sure we're ready to go. And just like talking about Anara, there's a lot of different things we need to bring with us or find locally as resources. So water is a huge one in particular situations of why are we taking the next steps before we go to Mars to go to particular places like the moon. And in this particular case, this is Artemis, which is NASA's next program to go back to the moon and stay sustainably. And the reason we're going and looking at the South Pole is because there's water there. And so water is so key for us as humans to live. Like, you may not think about it every day. You just go to your sink, or you go to maybe bottled water and you get clean, fresh water. There are places, obviously, where it's challenging to get clean water. But in general, it's something that's just surrounds us. It rains, sometimes that's annoying, but for being in these extreme environments, it's really, really important that we have water, or we bring enough water, or we can generate or make water somehow. And so kind of like going back to another where you were kind of, humans originally would live near water sources, or they would have to bring water to them. So originally they lived near rivers, eventually they were able to make wells, and then now we have like modern plumbing. But in that same way, we are going to have to try to go ahead and find that water. And that's why we're going to the South Pole. So it's going to be very dark, it's going to be very cold there. But the key thing is there's lots of water that we believe we can go ahead and harvest on our way to be there. So these are the couple of things we're going to talk about today, is like, what are the things we need to think about that maybe being on Earth, we don't even process. It's not a big deal. So I want to give a little bit of a definition of what is an extreme environment. And I went back to Wikipedia because it's a very easy to understand generic definition. But an extreme environment is a habitat that's very hard to survive in. So, and it's multiple things. It's not just water, but it's the temperatures, it's the energy sources, it's the different pressures, all of these things that we need physically to survive. We don't find all of these things necessarily in what we consider for us an extreme environment. And so there are a few on Earth. They're very rare, but there are a few. The geographic poles are considered them. There's deserts and volcanoes, and the deep, of course, trenches. But in general, really, Earth is very kind to us, and we have a lot of resources. And if you study astronomy, if you like astronomy, you'll realize that the Earth is actually very, very unique, even within our full universe. And so, why did I get into this? What was something that maybe piqued me about learning about extreme environments? Well, when I was a little girl, I did a lot of sailing with my family, a lot of exploring. That was my first team. I loved being on sailboats. I loved exploring in our backyard. And then as I got older, my team expanded beyond my family to athletics, and I really loved being parts of clubs and groups at school, and I was able to run cross country. So you see me running there in high school and then running in college, and that was something that also taught me a lot of life skills, being on teams, as far as working on multidisciplinary teams that I now work on. So I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity to be part of different teams, be part of different clubs, even if you love STEM and you think, oh, I can study on my own. In the real world, we all work together. It's really important to be part of a team. And so the last picture I showed there is me working on some of my first official publications as a scientist, which was very exciting. So I wanted to be a scientist when I was a little girl, and it's amazing to be one today. One of the things that was a crossover job was taking science and then using it in a way to understand how astronauts train in spacesuits and do spacewalks. And that brought me to Houston, Texas, where I live now at Johnson Space Flight Center. And I would work in mission control there when the astronauts were in space doing the spacewalks. And I would also have the pleasure of training and working with them on the ground. And so, being in an extreme environment, I want to talk a little bit about that second element, which is pressure. Because a lot of the places we go, so outer space, even the moon, and then even different planets like Mars, don't have the same atmosphere we have. And our bodies do need pressure. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's something like we don't even are aware of a lot of times. And it's one of the reasons why we need a spacesuit. So I brought Molly here. She's wearing a spacesuit. And you can see the spacesuit has to cover her entire body. It's really important because it's providing pressure for her so she can go into environments that have different types of pressure. Now, there is one time that you probably might have experienced a little bit of a pressure change, tiny bit of a pressure change, and that's when you fly in an airplane. So when you fly in an airplane, and you might feel your ears, a little bit of pain in your ears. And if you swallow a little bit, or you chew gum, or you drink something, that pressure might alleviate. And that is the pressure differentiation in the airplane itself. So they have to pressurize the inside of the airplane because the outside is a very much lower pressure. So by pressurizing the inside of the airplane, they're allowing you to stay safe. And then when they come back to the surface, then they're at a surface level, which is usually 14.7. Which is kind of what we're normally all at when we do that. Now, this spacesuit is great for going to lower pressures. So when you go to lower pressures, this is what you want. You want a spacesuit like this. Now, when you go to higher pressures, you have a little bit different of a suit that you wear, especially if you go deep, deep, deep down into the ocean. And so it's really important if you're interested in spacesuits to understand all the different types and what are the benefits of the suits. Now you can see here, this is a walking suit. So she's gonna have, especially if we're going to the moon and Mars, she's gonna have pretty robust footwear, unlike the suits they wear now. And then also she's gonna have some different upgrades that's gonna happen on the front of the suit, and the back will look pretty much the same. So she's already kind of getting ready for those next steps. But the suits you see in the pictures here, those are the suits for the space station. And so one of the things we do is, I'm going to come back to that slide. We actually train in a really big pool called the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, and that allows us to match some of the conditions to working on the space station and on the space shuttle when we had it. So this is a very cool pool that if you get a chance to come and visit Johnson Space Flight Center, I would encourage you to see. And it's all the different ways we need to understand how to train and get ready to be in those extreme environments. One thing I wanted to mention though is, aside from the work I do, I also really enjoy lots of different hobbies. So you can see my husband and I, we have dogs and we have a house, and working as a scientist has allowed me to be a scuba diver and work with coral restoration in the Florida Keys, which I love. I'm a private pilot, so I love to fly seaplanes. And so, you know, being a scientist or being an engineer allows you to do a lot of different things. You don't have to just pick one thing for your career. You can have kind of fun hobbies, and we get paid well enough to have those hobbies. So we have very full lives. Like I said, we're part of teams, and it may not be what you always expect when you think of, especially a scientist. So I was very lucky in that I had the opportunity to not just work with the astronauts, but also get in one of these spacesuits and go into the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory and do some training, just like we train with the astronauts, feel what it's like. And it is challenging. So one thing I would suggest for you is, if exploring these environments is something you're interested in, if you're interested in being an astronaut and wearing one of these suits, I think it's really important that you keep up your physical endurance as well. So you want to be healthy, you want to drink water, you want to get rest, and you want to make sure you're exercising, because all of those things are part of the physical demands and the cognitive demands of going into these environments. The space station has been amazing. It's been 25 years in orbit. We have astronauts up every single day from multiple international countries, and they're even expanding more and more as we go. And this will lay a lot of lessons learned that we've had to moving to Mars and the moon. And one of the things, though, I want to mention too is not just space, because a lot of people think about extreme environments being just space. But there's efforts now to go and live under the water. You know, our oceans are just vast around our planet. And so there's an opportunity there to explore and live sustainably under the water. We have a friend of mine, Dr. Joe Jaturi, just went ahead and spent 100 consecutive days under the water, and which means he lived in a habitat, one of the ones that I actually talked to you guys from at Explored by the Seat of Your Pants. And he stayed there 100 days. So for 100 days, he didn't come above the water and surface and see the sunshine. And he took a whole bunch of data and experiments and talked to classrooms and kids about what that meant. And that's something that we're looking to do more. In fact, the number of days humans have spent under the water is less than the number of days that we've had astronauts in low Earth orbit and outer space. So it is a new and very exciting area to explore. This is Aquarius. I had an opportunity to visit Aquarius, and I want to play a video for you here because, as I mentioned, the pressure is different in Aquarius. It's higher, and that can sometimes affect our vocal cords. Let me know if you can't hear the video.
Hi, from Aquarius. If my voice sounds weird, it's because we're under the water. We're actually 47 feet, and it was so cool to be down here today. And I don't know if you can see some fish and some coral outside. And then earlier I'll show some pictures of an octopus that was hanging out with us.
So my voice, because of the pressure on my voice actually went up. I'm a little excited today, so you may not hear as much of a difference. But when I got down there and we all started talking, it was very funny because you could hear all of our voices being slightly higher. In the spacesuit, because the pressure is lower, some astronauts' voices actually get deeper, which is interesting. And here's a boat.
Hi, from Aquarius.
Here is, let's see if I can go. Here's the picture of the octopus that we saw that was just chilling and sleeping under the window. It was outside, but it was between kind of a cover of the window, being protected and just kind of taking a nap there. So that was really cool. So, you know, in these environments, you are living in the environment with all of the other marine creatures that are there. There's a whole respect to being in their environment. And we want to make sure if we do this, we live in a very balanced way with them and we don't destroy the environment that we're going down to, because this is their home first as well. So yeah, so one of the things that we have to do, so I've talked already about water and I've talked about atmosphere. So materials is a really important feature for understanding going to extreme environments. The materials we select for spacesuits, the materials that we select for the habitats themselves are really important. You can see here that Aquarius is a wonderful thing, but the salt water actually corrodes the environment there. And we knew that was going to happen, but you can see there's a lot of rust here. And then the materials, you can see there's a lot of marine growth here on the outside, which is good. But we also need to make sure we keep it clear of the interfaces that we need to have. So here I'm understanding how to close off some of the emergency oxygen lines that are needed for the habitat. So we want to stay balanced within that environment, but we have to pick the right materials so that when we spend the money to build the habitats, or we go and you know, launch them from Earth to the moon or Mars or wherever we're going, they don't degrade over time and they actually stay in a good state. So, you know, a whole nother area that I think is super interesting is material sciences. We're making so much progress, especially in coatings, but there's so much more work to do. So it is a really cool area that is very influential to us surviving in extreme environments. But that being said, there's lots of different jobs that you can do. You know, there's so many aspects to exploring, and you don't actually have to be the explorer itself. So if you don't want to go, if that's maybe not for you, we have so many different people we need to support. So even reporters sharing the news, and video and art designers, people working on websites, people working on getting videos out for the mass public so that everyone else can understand what we're doing. We have chefs that have to work on food, because right now there needs to be a balance of nutritional food that people eat, but also food that tastes good, that's similar to what we're used to eating on Earth. And then also potentially even trying to create food and grow food at the location that we are. So that's something that they're really looking at both under the water and in space, of how do we create enough food so we don't have to take it all with us. And then there's so many, of course, engineers, pilots, programmers, scientists, doctors, so all your traditional STEM degrees as well. So just want to mention that because one of my close friends, and she has had a long time working with social media and writing speeches, and she works in human space flight. So, you know, you don't have to think just because I'm not interested in a STEM career doesn't mean this isn't the field for me. But of course, if you are, you're going to be even more successful in working and making a difference as we go. The last thing I wanted to mention is a few things that you might want to consider reading, new books that have come out recently. So these are, you know, when I was a little girl, I read a lot of biographies about the moon landings and the Apollo program. I didn't always understand it the first time I read it. So some of these books I read multiple times as I got older. Even one of them I was rereading just last week. So, you know, these books you can look through. There's lots of pictures, but also it can be something you can read over time. Handprints on Hubble is great. It talks about repairing of the Hubble vehicle, and it focuses on engineering and tools. So if that's something that's interesting to you, this is a really good book here. Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars, and I heard there's a movie coming out now, which is very exciting, is about Colonel Eileen Collins, and she was the first female shuttle commander. So she talks about leadership and getting outside your comfort zone and how that can open new opportunities for you. And then Nicole Stott, who is a friend of mine, she talks about conservation and art and how you don't have to pick just STEM, that art is such an interwoven thing and it feeds each other. And it's so important to kind of appreciate both. So I really love these three books. I'd recommend them to you. They just came out in this last year or two. I think they're great to read. And of course, I just want to say, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and be kind to this planet. And with that, I would love to take some questions and hear from you.
Ah, well, Adele, thank you so much, first of all, for such a wild ride. You actually covered basically every major theme that we try to feature in all of our broadcasts in your talk itself. So way to go. Like, that is the best packing in 20 minutes we've ever had. Nicole Stott, by the way, friend of our show too. We've had her on like a dozen times. If you want to check out Nicole on our YouTube channel, we'd love to have our other two authors anytime. If you happen to know how to reach them, where the more inspiring people, the happier we are. And I want to stress too, just because I love to harp on this for kids. You talked about the International Space Station, which again, let's not forget, is a near magical laboratory that orbits the Earth every 90 minutes with actual people inside it. All our kids, I really encourage you, spotthestation.nasa.gov. You can be anywhere in the world. You can type in your city and it'll tell you like, oh yeah, at like 9:30 tonight, look in this direction of the sky and you'll see the ISS. If you want to see people in space, you can do that any day with that link. So do check that out. Adele, the first question, I love this question, and we get this basically with every single person who talks about space but isn't an astronaut. Would you go to space? And we'll extend this. Would you go to the moon, the Mars? Like, there's lots of space explorations in its new heyday, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on what you do.
Well, Jesse, what about you? Would you go?
I would go to space, absolutely. Like, I'd go today to space. I'd go to the moon because it's a pretty short trip. Mars is a little iffy because we're talking like at least a year journey, basically. And at this rate, because we haven't done it many times, it'll be a very high risk of things potentially going wrong, as prepared as we will be when we go. So the moon and space, yes. Mars, no for me. You?
Yeah, I would go. I have been to underwater habitats, as you mentioned. I've been able to do some kind of little things to experience maybe what it might be like to eventually go, and the challenges. And so I would love to go. I would go to Mars, but I would make sure it's a round trip. I won't want to come home and see my dogs again and my husband and stuff like that. But yes, I would absolutely go.
I like the hierarchy, the dog beat husband in that answer. Thank you. Yes, bring back in an hour anytime. Speaking of your underwater experience, were you scared? I mean, we highlighted this fun video of your voice changing, which is fantastic, but being at the seafloor seems like a little dicey for some of our kids. What was the experience like?
Well, I started diving 20 years ago, and so it was a process for me. At first I wasn't very comfortable taking my mask off, and I worked toward that to get more comfortable and the skills. So by the time I went to the habitat, I had several dives that I had experienced. I had several certifications. So, it is a process. It's something that, yes, you're always very safe. Safety is a big thing. Even in space, we're very much about safety. We did all the checks of our gear to make sure we were good. There were checks of the habitat. So, all of that said, once those checks are complete, then you have confidence and you get excited and you kind of go in and you enjoy the moment and you enjoy being there. And we were learning down there. So we were learning about all the emergency scenarios that they go through, how they built and maintain the habitat. So, once I get into that, once I get into all the learning and the training, sometimes you even forget where you are, but you're always very vigilant about the safety and what it takes.
Yeah. We have the privilege of featuring astronauts in this program, cave divers, like people in really risky professions. And the one unifying factor is there's a lot of prep. There is usually a little bit of fear. Like, I think a lot when I was a kid, I assumed that explorers, people like you, just had no fear. We're just like brave in every situation. And instead, it often seems to be like, we recognize that this is a potentially risky scenario. We prepare to make sure it isn't. We know what happens if there is a big challenge. And it's an important thing to feel. People that are fearless and go into some of these things where it's like, oh, blasé, nothing going to happen ever. That's where things can go a little bit wrong. So I'm really glad you answered it that way. Thanks, Adele. I want to stress too, I'm going to take this opportunity. Every time we have scuba divers on, I like to harp on this. You can start being a scuba diver at 8 years old. Patty Bubblemaker. So our youngest audience today, like, go do this at 10. You can get an open water certificate, which is what I have. So like, it's like black magic. You can explore 71% of the planet with a scuba diving license, and you can be as cool as Adele. So just go out there, finish this broadcast. Even if you're in Saskatchewan, you can go learn to dive in like a pool, quarry, lots of options.
Yeah, a lot of swimming and a lot of snorkeling. So, it's all kind of steps to get there.
Speaking of swimming, we got a question about your coral work. You briefly touched upon this. Now, we do a lot of coral broadcasts here. Coral conservation is a huge part of what we feature. Tell us more about this in the Florida Keys and what's the deal?
Sure. Well, I am not a marine biologist, so I work with them, I support them. But it was growing up in Florida. It was something that was passionate for me to be able to contribute. There was one day that I had finished a dive and I had picked up a whole bunch of garbage that was under the ocean and put it in my BCD, and I just thought, this is enough. I have to do something more. And so I found an organization that I love to volunteer with and go down on a regular basis. And I'm able to work under the water with them to help them take the coral that grows in these coral nurseries that they have in the Florida Keys and move that coral to NOAA-approved locations, where we then put them on areas of the reef that have maybe not doing so well, to try to reinvigorate and create that underwater habitat for all the marine life there. So again, skill sets cross over. And if you're interested in something that's not, there's no wrong answers in life. So if you're interested in what you want to do, and meaning like, this doesn't align exactly with my career, but I think this is really cool, go after it, because that's what I mean about no wrong answers. There's obviously wrong answers in school, but in general, there's no wrong answer for you. So if you're interested in what you want to do, that's a yes, and go after it and learn more.
Yep. You highlighted this so beautifully at the end, because something that we like to harp on is that you do not need to be a PhD, head of the smartest person in school at every stage of the process to end up with a really cool career. If you want to be interested in space or coral work or exploring the Arctic, whatever, there are so many different ways you can get involved in that. And you can do it as a hobby. You can do it as something where you're taking part in a fun way. You're collaborating with groups that are already doing this amazing work. So thank you for featuring that. And we've been doing a lot of coral planting stuff lately. Like the fact that we can like bring back coral reefs like we do forests, or we like raise them in little nurseries and bring them to places where they're going to thrive, is just amazing. It's one of my favorite bits of science. So thank you for that, Adele. That's awesome. Speaking of skill sets, because you have a lot, we got a question about how long it took to become a pilot, because we don't have many pilots to come on.
So, it varies. It is, let's see, I'm trying to think of something that's similar. So if you do sports, sometimes we take soccer, for example, there may be certain skills in soccer that you need, like, kicking a ball into a goal or juggling or other things, passing it. And that varies depending on just you, right? How coordinated you are, your natural talent, maybe how often you get to go practice. So flying a plane is very similar to that. So it takes the amount of time it needs for you to build that skill set. In general, some people do it in as short as a couple months, but some people it takes a couple years because they're working full time and they have to fit it in. Just like finding time to practice, they have to find time to go fly. So for me, I was more on the years side, because I was working shuttle flights at that time and working EVAs. And so every time I'd kind of get close, we'd have bad weather or something would happen. So there is grit and determination. And if you love doing something, sometimes you need to stick with it to get there in the end. But it's wonderful. And I get to take all kinds of people that I love up now flying, and we go get what's called a $100 hamburger, which means that you go get a regular hamburger, but you have to fly to an airport to get it. And, it's kind of expensive. So it's this joke of just taking everybody up, and we fly somewhere and we go get a meal and we come home.
Sounds fantastic. What fun is that? Speaking of your mission control time and working on EVAs, how has space exploration or astronaut work changed since you started? I mean, a lot of our kids come to this with this framework of like, there's SpaceX now, and there's more missions, and we're going to the moon again. And there's Artemis, and Mars has been talked about all the time. So it seems like a really heady time to be in this field. And I'm curious, as someone who's been involved for a while, if you've noticed a shift in, I don't know, the whole feeling behind it all, or who's coming in, or what the deal might be.
That's a big question. So I think the answer is yes. Like now growing up, there was a time where maybe you were a little bit limited, where you could go work at NASA, or you could work a contractor for NASA. There was a couple very big contractors out there. I won't name them, but now there's so many different types of companies. Like you said, there's SpaceX, there's Blue Origin, there's Sierra Space, just go on and on and on. Intuitive Machines, so many that you really have a variety of options, and you can find what's called a corporate culture. So the right environment for you, and that's something I share when you are picking a college. So a lot of times, if you're thinking about going to school, either maybe or just even a training program for sports or anything, if you go and it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel like, there's always a little bit of adjustment, but if it doesn't feel right for you, keep looking, because the feeling of the environment, the culture of the environment is really important. And so the same thing, there's now so many options of different types of environments to work in for human spaceflight. It's very exciting. And we have seen people shift back and forth. We've seen a lot of NASA people go and help share what's called lessons learned, so our best practices to some of these companies. And I think this is very exciting. I think it's going to take a lot of efforts, a lot of people to get us to eventually have multiple places we're living outside the Earth, so low Earth orbit, Moon, Mars, all this exploration. And it's going to be a combination of government and private industries. So.
Adele, what a beautiful answer. And this is something that we have a lot of high schoolers come on and they're like, what should we do about university applications? Where should we look to? And I want to focus on this for a second because, when I was a student in high school, I was like, okay, I want to go to the best university. Like in Canada, it's U of T, it's McGill, it's UBC. Like those are the three big ones. And as I've gotten older and as I've seen people who've gone to all these different places, it's the places that have the best student experience, or as, in the professional world, corporate culture, like find a place where people want to work together. They're excited to work together. It's friendly. It's nice. You have more opportunities. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be the place that's the most prestigious. It can be a place that is just going to help you gain those skills and be better in everything that you're going to do. And I think that's a really important thing that our students think about.
I would add a little bit on that you do want to push yourself, right? So you are growing, and college is a really important time to get your foundation of your STEM degree, whatever it is, or just even any degree, but especially your STEM degree. And so you do want to stretch and work hard. That is a time that, I gave up things, right? I didn't go to as many parties or whatever because I needed to study. And running cross country helped me to keep a balance. And also it was part of a scholarship I had. So sometimes I had to make decisions that were about keeping my academic career moving forward while also running. So I think there's a lot of value in going to a place that's going to academically challenge you. Absolutely. But you also, like you mentioned, want to find that balance of people that you can study with, people that you can do labs with. You're going to be in labs for long periods of time, engineering projects, especially senior engineering projects. So finding that right. And you kind of, it because you go to the campus and you walk around and maybe you observe a class and you kind of feel that environment, and then like you said, okay, this is the one for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, Adele. I like to put people's feet to the fire in one question of my own in every broadcast, and so I'm really curious with space exploration. We get this from kids a lot. In fact, it's been really interesting over the last 5 years, the shifting of the age of kids that ask this kind of question. So I'm going to ask it on their behalf. How do we justify the expense? We're going to the moon. We're going to Mars. We're doing all this space exploration. And there's so many problems here on Earth. Why? How can we make that case for space exploration when all this is happening?
Yeah, well, I think some of the challenges on Earth has to do with the resources. So we've grown up having an abundant planet, right? So I talked about water and the atmosphere, the pressure, but the materials, everything surrounding you, from your house to your desk to the clothes you're wearing, everything surrounding you, yes, was potentially made by a company or a plant, but more importantly, it came from Earth. It came from the resources within this planet, and those are not an unlimited amount of resources. We eventually we're going to need to supplement those resources, or we won't have much of a planet left. And so it's going to be really important to look for other places for those resources. It's going to be important to maybe take a little bit of stress off the Earth and put it in other locations so we can potentially kind of heal or restore some of the things that we're kind of really stressing right now. And to me, that big picture is really important to me. So I love a mission. I love working with a team, but I really, really think having this bigger mission that you're going after is important as well. And so for me, this idea of my little tiny contribution of being able to work with a team and move us that much forward to being able to explore, but also help the planet is one of the reasons why I think it's so important.
What a beautiful answer. Thank you very much for that, Adele. Before we wrap up, is there any final message you want to leave with kids about your exploratory work, about STEM, about career options for them? Anything you want to leave us with as a final message for our audience today?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I talk about being kind to yourself, it's also about, what you're seeing every day. So social media and advertisements, just realize that, and you probably know this growing up because younger generations are more into social media than even I am, even though I have accounts. You guys are really smart about social media, but understand that even when you see a scientist post or an engineering team, recently there was a post of a flight that I was on for some of the spacesuit design stuff. And, that takes time. That takes a long time to have that accomplishment. When someone wins a Nobel Prize, it takes decades, sometimes their entire career to have that accomplishment. It's many, many people on the team. So I think take a step back when you get overwhelmed and you think, oh, I'm not this, or I'm not that, or I'm not doing enough, or I didn't have that many successes or likes or whatever it is, and realize that there's just so much going on. And for those posts or for those things that you see, there was probably a lot of prep time or a lot of work behind them before they ever got to that post. And that's the reality of it, right? And there was a lot of failures that might have happened before they ever got to publish that paper or successful on that experiment. And it can, even to us as adults, it can feel like, oh my gosh, everyone's winning but me. Everyone's accomplishing so much but me. But the reality is that it's taking all those people a long time usually to try to make those accomplishments. So just kind of, realize that.
You're the only one to answer this final question that way, so I really appreciate that. Dr. Tay joined us talking about neuroscience. She talked about some of the challenges with social media, and it's a really important message, especially for Gen Z. So take that to heart. Adele, thank you very much for that. That was very thoughtful. As I said at the beginning, if you guys want to check out the rest of our amazing If Then series, we've got 7 more broadcasts to go over the next little bit. We got one next week that we had to reschedule, so do check out that. IfThenSheCan.org has so many more resources on Adele, on all the other ambassadors, and every initiative they've done. And if you want to check out Adele personally, you're all over the web doing all sorts of cool stuff. So check out her in a plane, in the water, the seafloor, just doing incredible things all over the world. It's very exciting. And Adele, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you for